The Balance Breakdown is back, folks, and we are going to break down the latest in UFC's card installment that happened in the UFC Apex this past weekend. A lightweight contest between Mateus Gamrot and Rafael Fiziev took up the main event slot. Bryce Mitchell and Dan Ige were in the co-main event slot, plus a bunch of other fights we're going to breeze through over the course of the next hour. Harry Powell is with me as always to help me break down the action, and I look forward to hearing his thoughts on the fights. Not a great card. Look, we criticize cards on paper, and we can come in here with our tail between our legs when they don't play out as we expect, or they're more exciting as we expect. But this one wasn't great, topped with the disappointment of the main event with the injury. And that's it, Harry. MMA giveth, and then MMA taketh away. And that's what we kind of had with the main event. Your overall thoughts on the card before we get into the nitty gritty?
Yeah, not great. Not great. Like you said, and you sort of said perfectly, is a lot of the times coming into these cards, we can have maybe an adverse opinion on them based on sort of how much divisional reckoning there's going to be. Now, bearing in mind, these are fight night cards, and so we have to grade them as fight night cards. And generally, we only see sort of big divisional movements at the maybe the main event and the co-main event, right? But very often we see there is prospects on these cards. There are people that we really need to think about. There are up-and-comers. There might be a veteran fight somewhere. There are lots of interesting notes throughout most of the fight night cards that we've had in the last little while. At the very least, these fight night cards seem to produce a lot of really exciting fights, regardless of whether they're finishes or decisions. Lots of exciting fights. And in this specific fight card, I mean, the main event, for as long as it lasted, was wonderful. Really enjoyed it. I think the co-main event was fight of the night. Both of those fellas produced an absolutely brilliant performance. Michelle Waterson and Waterson-Gomez, and Marina Rodriguez was as one side of a beatdown as you could imagine. Brian Battle and AJ Fletcher, I mean, there are some things in there that absolutely shouldn't happen in MMA. Charles Jourdain and Ricardo Ramos we'll get to. But I think whilst Jourdain got the spotlight this week, and we'll talk about why, there are also elements of his game that will be shown up drastically. Arguetta and Miles Johns was a fight that happened. Fair play to Miles Johns. He went out and won the decision there. But again, nothing crazy to write home about. Tim Means and Fialho, I mean, fucking hell. If you're losing to 375-year-old Tim Means, like...
We called it.
Perfectly as well. Absolutely perfectly. Brundage and Malkoun was unfortunate to have ended in the way it did, mostly because I enjoyed the grappling. But then the last three fights, or the first three fights, I should say, are just horrendous low quality stuff. Like Usman not being able to finish Collier was just disastrous. Hannah Goldy shouldn't be a UFC fighter, and Montserrat Rendon and Tamiras Videl, like the most exciting part of that was when we got to see a split decision, and some fellas on Twitter complained, like, just not a good fight all in all whatsoever. So top to bottom, I mean, you know, there are some stellar performances in there and some interesting fights for sure, but yeah, top to bottom, not a great fight card to sit through. Really wasn't.
Absolutely. Well, let's get straight into the action, and let's start at the main event, Harry. And that was Rafael Fiziev going in there to take on Mateus Gamrot. Highly touted fight, highly anticipated fight. We were buzzing to see it, and we only got to see around 7 minutes of action before the unfortunate injury of Rafael Fiziev, it seemed, and it appeared that he hurt his left knee. Talks of an ACL tear. I'm not sure. I haven't seen any confirmation about what the exact injury was, but it did not look good for Fiziev. And just a very unfortunate ending to a fight that was playing out quite interestingly. And we've spoken on the preview show about this fight in great detail, and we were wondering, you know, what Fiziev was going to do to kind of counteract the approaches, the single leg attacks of Gamrot. We seen a little tidbit of that. We seen Gamrot being successful with the single leg, and the fight was just playing out beautifully and was on a knife edge before the injury happened. Talk to me about what you've seen in the fight for what we did see. Look, we have 7 minutes of action to break down, and I'll gladly break it down. It's very unfortunate, as I said, the way it ended, but what can we do? These things do happen sometimes. Harry, your thoughts on how the fight was playing out before Fiziev got injured?
I think it was a close fight.
Was
Like the sort of the echo from Twitter was that Fiziev won the first round handily. Not sure I agree with that. I think Fiziev won the first round, but I don't think he won it as handily as people seem to.
Oh yeah, no, not me neither. Like I think I scored it for Fiziev, but like I mean, not handily. I mean, yeah, that's very loosey goosey.
Like I think the thing that impressed me was from both guys, right? So I'll start with Fiziev because it's easier. Fiziev's body hitting was really nice, and his ability to switch stances from jab to then throw something, whether it was the left hook or he found a right uppercut at one point. Lovely stuff. His ability to hide kicks is insane. Is absolutely insane. There's no wind up. There's no hit roll. There's nothing. It either comes like a lightning bolt to your leg, and that was one of the most impactful strikes of the round, was a low kick that caused Gamrot to like stumble fucking 15 meters that way. Or when he comes high, he just no-sells it so beautifully that that stuff is, for me as watching it from an analytical point of view, it's gorgeous to watch that. Gorgeous, because the efficacy of those kicks, when you can hide them as well as he does, they just hold no bounds, right? Like that slots into every stance, every type of fighting. If you can no-sell kicks like that, fantastic. But the thing that impressed me the most about Rafael Fiziev was his balance and his takedown defense. In that first round, we saw picture-perfect Gamrot takedown attempt. Ducks under a right hand, immediately goes not to the near leg, but to the far leg, turns the corner with that John Smith low single, picks Fiziev's leg up, and drives his foot up above his head. As he's running, if anything, Fiziev across the cage. Fiziev not only manages to not run directly backwards into the cage, to circle off, but to also keep his balance for significant amount of time, enough that he could out pummel that leg at that level of dexterity off the grip of Gamrot.
Insane.
Unbelievable.
I saw some speculation online today with that exact sequence with Fiziev with his leg over the head trying to defend a single leg, where somebody did point out, and it looked like there was a little bit of a buckle on the knee, on the left knee, when he exited from that. Now, complete speculation. Obviously, the knee popped when the knee popped, but I look back at it, it looked like a reaction from that excellent defense, but it may have ended up costing Fiziev in the long run. But look, like I said, that's pure speculation. The video does look like there was something happened, or there was a slight reaction from Fiziev, but when you're being pushed back with your leg up above your head and you're trying to defend a takedown and you're trying to circle away from the cage, that's going to draw some unusual reactions. It's not the position that you want to be in, but excellent defense by Fiziev on the single leg. We also saw a lot of switching of stances from Fiziev, which we talked about as well, Harry, on the preview show. And that was done to kind of combat the single leg approach where, while you're switching stance, you're showing a different look for someone like Gamrot, and you're making him reset. You're making him try to kind of get him in that trap again. And he did an excellent job in between switching stances and defending the takedown very early in the fight.
Yeah, but I think what Gamrot did really well is, because he can throw that single on both sides, meaning he can go across the body and he can go to your back leg, but he can also go to your lead leg. As Fiziev was switching stances, one of the reactions that Gamrot would give would he would just feint and start to look. He would look at the knee, or he would look at the back leg, or he'd angle towards something. And what that started to make Fiziev do is, as he switched, Fiziev was aware for a couple of milliseconds, just to make sure that Gamrot wasn't going to try and time the stance switch with a level change. And Gamrot once or twice, I can't quite remember if it was twice, I think it was just once, managed to time the stance switch and landed a clean right hand right down the pipe, because Fiziev was aware that there's potentially a level change coming. And so I was impressed also with the Gamrot jab in the first round. I don't think he got it working enough. I think if he'd got it working a little more, maybe we could have been talking about a Gamrot 10-9 in that round, but I thought Fiziev did enough. In the second, again, the takedown defense is wild, right? Gamrot catches a kick and launches immediately into a takedown. And I thought this was an interesting reaction from Gamrot. He'd taken a few kicks from Fiziev. Now, injured leg or not, I don't really want to take any kicks from Rafael Fiziev if I don't have to. And I thought it was really interesting from Gamrot. If we'd have continued this structure going out, well, Gamrot is making Fiziev question his stance switches, which are a big part of his game. He's making him question throwing kicks to the body because they're getting caught and immediately being turned into takedowns. And so he's slightly starting to edge away some of the wide base of Arsenal that Fiziev has. Now, obviously, we didn't get to see that, and I'd love to have seen what reactions and what adjustments Fiziev had made going forward. But the original takedown, Fiziev's ability to ride, sprawl, Gamrot pokes his head out like a sit out and starts to turn Fiziev to the mat. Fiziev, his hips hit for half a second, he bounces right back up, and he's to a 4-point, he's turning in, he's getting underhooks, and he's moving away. Unbelievable.
It truly was. And it's like the unfortunate thing about this fight was that, like, if we were to describe this fight as maybe painting a picture, we only got the outlines of the picture. We only got the bare minimum reads. You know, obviously Gamrot was working on the stance switches. He was taking his reads, trying to find those safe entries. We had Fiziev, who was defending takedowns, but did find himself on the mat briefly as well. Gamrot was starting to get off his jab, as you said, some of his punches, and was starting to build his way into the fight. And it was just at the moment where the fight was kind of starting to take shape as when the injury happened, and it was very unfortunate. And you know, we can sit here and speculate all day, but we don't know how really it would have played out. Big questions I would have had was that would have Fiziev been able to keep his explosiveness throughout 5 rounds? Gamrot was pushing that pace, and it was a heavy enough pace over the course of the 7 minutes. But you know, he was starting to slowly at the very start of the fight, it wasn't great for him. He wasn't getting great success. He couldn't get in, and that's normal. Once he started to get the reads, he started to get in on the hips a little bit on Fiziev and started to make things a little bit interesting. And I think the game plan for Gamrot was going to be pretty much that throughout 5 rounds, with Fiziev trying to kind of keep the fight on the feet and landing the more impactful shots. And I guess he had some success with that as well. Is that kind of the full-on read that you got from the fight?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I got from the 7 minutes, right? Like, we could have been witnessing, especially when we saw Gamrot have a little bit more success in closing the distance, especially in that second takedown attempt where he has a body lock in Fiziev and he manages to unlock the body lock, land some shots, and go immediately back to a body lock. That was telling to me, because most of the time a guy will take a shot with an unlocked body lock to turn in, get an underhook, and circle off, right? But Gamrot was able to do it so quickly and so effectively that Fiziev didn't have time to get an underhook, turn in, and circle away. And so I don't know. Now, one thing I will say, and I think this is now obviously a massive caveat that we have, hindsight being 2020, the injury itself, and especially if there was a potential tweak from defending the single leg in the first, that to me tells me that Fiziev had an injury coming in, because I don't think the hip would have rotated aggressively enough that when he put his foot on the floor, that it would have caused some form of ACL change or movement, because the foot came down straight.
Yeah, like it didn't look like an impact that, like, where there was any great twisty motion or anything like that. So it might have been an accumulation thing. Like, very peculiar. I thought he was after breaking his foot or something off Gamrot's elbow or something like that, especially from the reaction. Or I thought it was a check that I had missed. It would just happen so quickly in the instant of the fight. It was kind of hard to get a read on what had happened in that. But yeah, it looked like it shouldn't have kind of buckled at that stage, and maybe it was something before. Like, look, if Fiziev had an injury coming in, it didn't really look like it physically. He looked in tremendous shape going in there. I want to say he looked in even better shape than he went in against Gaethje. He looked like had very minimal body fat anyway, but he looked like he got his body fat down to the absolute minimum here, was absolutely shredded going in there. So, I mean, if there was an injury, fair play to him. He kind of got himself in good kind of nick for the fight. But I mean, yeah, the sequence of events was pretty peculiar for the way the injury kind of happened. And he wasn't really shocked, really. Like, obviously, he was gutted, but it wasn't really like a shocked reaction or grasping the knee straight away. It was kind of like maybe he knew that there was something kind of going on there, whether it happened previously in the fight or, like you said, in the camp.
Yeah. And just the way that his leg bent as he was hitting the mat, it just like the thing that's really difficult when we're judging these situations is we know how good a fighter's game face is. And so he could have gone in with a significant injury, and because of the magnitude of the fight, because of the magnitude of the ramifications for his career, he may not wanted to pull out, because you don't know who you're going to get matched with again, especially if you're going in with some form of ACL tear, whatever. You know that that's potentially 6 months out, right?
It shouldn't be that way, but the UFC would definitely frown upon him throwing that main event into a loop. But I mean, that's the kind of ingredients of maybe a bad card, really, if you're going to be worrying about a fighter pulling out on the main event falling through. But yeah, you do have all of that extra pressure on you as a fighter when you are in the headline slot, and as history would say, the UFC don't look kindly to you pulling out of those kind of fights.
Right. And you'd much rather take 6 months off after a win than take 6 months off with no paycheck, having not turned up for the fight at all, right?
Yes.
And so, obviously all those takedowns were high amplitude. A lot of the takedown defense was high amplitude. And it could just be that we did a bit of a Jan Blachowicz here, and he could turn around and say, my body didn't break, but Fiziev's did break. And so fine, sure, these things happen in MMA. But the moment I saw it, I said, I didn't know what had happened. I knew that it was his knee, obviously, but didn't know specifically what had happened. But my brain said that's a pre-existing injury, because a leg just doesn't snap, or a knee just doesn't snap like that. It just doesn't snap like that. Especially not when you're the fighter of the physical capacity of Fiziev, who's obviously putting all of the extracurricular work in the gym to make his tendons and his ligaments as strong as possible. A leg just doesn't snap like that. I also, maybe this is me being a little, I don't know what the word is, but I'll just say, and you can get your thoughts. I'm not sure that I really like the Gamrot follow-up shots. I know that it's necessary.
Or the celebration after the fact. It's like, Jesus, what are we doing here? Like, I mean, whatever, you lose the run of yourself here, but it was like, yeah, I took a little bit of an exception to that. Look, it's crazy after a fight there. You don't know what's truly after happening. You're in the zone, like, but whatever about the follow-up shots, but like the celebration after was like, is a little bit much, a little bit too much, Harry. Obviously it was for you too.
Yeah, like, look, if Gamrot had leg kicked him, and as he put his leg to the ground, the leg kick had caused some fucking madness in the knee, fine. That's a blow that's led to a level of impact, a level of damage, and Fiziev can't continue. Fine, no problem. Then it would equate to him dropping Fiziev or whatever it is. But there was a fair amount of distance between them. Gamrot had just reset and circled off as Fiziev throws a kick, and as he plants his foot down, something mad happens with his knee. Firstly, as soon as he goes down, Fiziev lets out an audible something from his mouth. Herb Dean's immediately running over. Herb Dean's a big schlub at this point, and so Gamrot beats him there because he's an athlete and lands a couple of shots. But if you're Gamrot, I get it. Like, I get it. You know that if he is injured, you don't want him to get up and be able to continue the fight and possibly finish you. You have to finish the fight. I understand that. But if you can see Herb Dean racing towards the fighter, come on. Like, you know that he's injured. You know that he's just gone down. The likelihood of this fight continuing is pretty low. I don't think, and look, don't get me wrong, the shots that Fiziev took probably aren't taking any extra years off his life, but just from a sportsmanship perspective, it doesn't look great. And as you say, the celebration afterwards, I mean, you lost the first round, right? Close fight, don't get me wrong, close round, but you lose the first round. your man throws a kick, injures his knee, and the celebration. Like, I get it. You won the fight. That's fine. But in the longevity of your record, when we look down, there's a slight asterisk next to the Fiziev win, right? And it's because
There absolutely is. Yeah, there absolutely is. But like, I mean, that's not Gamrot's fault either. I don't think the UFC will or should they kind of treat it as an asterisk. But like, whenever we have an injury in this kind of fight, there always is going to be an asterisk. Like, to say that there isn't, it's like, I don't know. Like, there is, like, there's no doubt about it. The injury happened, like the same way as there was an asterisk beside Conor McGregor's loss to Dustin Poirier. There's an asterisk beside the loss and an asterisk beside the win, and that's just unfortunate circumstances of the fight. But like I said, the UFC shouldn't treat it that way. They should treat it like a win, and they should match up Gamrot as if he won that fight, because he did win that fight, and he won it maybe by not the most legitimate of circumstances, but he won it nonetheless, and the division needs to move on. Where would you like to see him go next?
So I really like the idea of the Dustin Poirier fight. Mostly because I like it and I don't like it, right? Because I would love to see Gamrot and Justin Gaethje, but I feel like after Justin Gaethje turned away Rafael Fiziev, he's kind of in and around the conversation for a title shot, right? Now, if you do Dustin Poirier versus Gamrot and Dustin Poirier wins, well, now yet again, you've got Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje in and around the conversation for a title shot. And I don't necessarily need to see Dustin Poirier versus Gaethje 3 for the number one contender, though that kind of also makes sense in some roundabout fashion, right? But I feel like Gamrot at this point, you have to give him the biggest name possible, right? You just have to. Big wins on his resume, big wins on his resume. And okay, asterisk to this or not, he won the fight. Like,
he won, and he has wins over Arman Tsarukyan, and he has other good wins. Obviously, a very close decision loss to Beneil Dariush. That could be another option, although they only fought 2 fights ago, so I'm not all that high. I really love your Dustin Poirier shout out. I'm wondering, I lay you up every week, and then I like to criticize or I like to agree. So that's what I'm going to do this time as well. That's the format. But I put myself in Dustin Poirier's shoes, and I'm not sure if he wants to take a fight like that at this stage of his career. Have eyes on something else. But I mean, if you're going to honor the ranking that you have in your division, you've got to take fights like that too. So I actually genuinely do like that Gamrot and Poirier fight. I mean, you've got Michael Chandler, who's also there in limbo as well. God knows what's happening with him and Conor. But maybe we'll hear something about that soon. But yeah, if it's not Beneil Dariush, and I don't want it to be, because, I think you do something fresh with Beneil. I think you probably give him Arman Tsarukyan, and I think you give Dustin Poirier Gamrot, and I think that plays out the lightweight division very, very well.
Yep, sign me up.
Let's do it. That's it. It's got the balance breakdown seal of approval. The UFC matchmakers just need to go in there and do their job. Someone who did do their job, Harry, was Bryce Mitchell. He went in there and got the job done. Didn't have it all go his own way. I mean, this fight was pretty much, I mean, I used the Ron Seal kind of opinion, and it was kind of like Ron Seal. It did exactly as I said in the tin. We had Dan Ige wanted to keep the fight standing, landing his shots and his jab, and he did so well, opening up a big cut over Bryce Mitchell. But it was just the grittiness of Bryce Mitchell that got him through, and he got the fight down where he wanted to get the fight down, and it was a typical Bryce Mitchell performance and a typical Bryce Mitchell win. And the Lord baby Jesus was shining down on him, Harry.
Yeah, that was one of the weirdest fucking entrances to the octagon I've ever seen. But I will also say that we should give incredible amounts of props to Dan Ige, who
all the time
fought like a fucking dog. He pushed Bryce Mitchell to the very, very, very limit. It tells you that when you get to a level of supreme conditioning, like both Bryce Mitchell and Dan Ige were coming into this fight, like if that was over 5 rounds, boy, oh boy, what a fucking fight we'd have in those last 2 rounds.
And you know what? Just to further credit Dan Ige, right? There's 2 things when I remembered watching this fight. We watched Edson Barbosa versus Bryce Mitchell at the start of last year. And in that fight, we saw Edson Barbosa be competitive, but then lose a little bit of heart, lose a little bit of fight, and then was just willing to accept losing by unanimous decision. And that's harsh on Edson. I like him as a fighter, but that's an honest assessment that I have in that fight. We did not get that with Dan Ige, as you said. We saw that dog. We saw how unwilling he was to accept positions, unwillingness to lose that fight. And I think it added to the excitement factor of the fight. It wasn't a no, didn't even come close to a fight of the year contender, but it was like a competitive fight throughout. And that was to the credit of Dan Ige and his tenacity to want to get onto the feet and to land those big shots.
Yeah, and it was his unwillingness to accept positions, right? His unwillingness to accept bad positions. There were moments when Mitchell was mounting him and he just waited and picked his spots and bridged and rolled and tucked and won inside space and, didn't give up head and arm positions and was constantly fighting. In every position, he was constantly fighting. There were moments that he reversed Bryce Mitchell and Bryce Mitchell just didn't know what the fuck was going on. Like the last 10 seconds of the third round, Dan Ige has Bryce Mitchell crumpled up against the fence, full mount, landing shots. I would have been so interested to see that fight play out over 5 rounds. But Bryce Mitchell had a tough first round. A lot of people scored the first round to Bryce Mitchell. I'm not sure I did, but the second round, you got to see the full Bryce Mitchell package. And just the thing that's so beautiful about him, there's a couple of things, but the way he enters takedowns is just gorgeous. It's effortless. It's graceful. The way he transitions from striking to grappling to submission offense to positional dominance to positional movement is just gorgeous to watch when he's in full flow. There are moments when there was one specific moment when he had a one hook of the back and he was sagging all of his weight, so much of his weight that almost his hip and shoulder were touching the mat. And Dan Ige had to use every ounce of strength possible just to keep his post on the mat and not get his back taken. And Bryce is just hanging there, weighing heavy, looking for positions, looking for moments. There is so much beauty in the single elements of his grappling game, but also how cohesive it is and how well he puts it together. Now, Dan Ige, to his credit, as we've said, was so good at finding holes in the games, reversing positions, punishing him when Bryce Mitchell made mistakes. But then again, we see Bryce Mitchell's ability from the bottom too, is his ability to use butterfly hooks, his ability to create space with overhooks, his forward shifting, his wrestling up from the bottom. It was just a real beautiful, magical fight to watch. And I was really impressed by both guys. Really impressed.
I was too. Really impressed by both guys, but I also have, I guess, an air of cynicism over Bryce Mitchell, and will he be able to do that against the upper elite of the division? And I thought about it, and I don't think that he will be able to do it because it is just too one-dimensional, Harry. And I seen that you're showing us the money sign there. Do you agree with that sentiment? Do you think that it's just, look, it's effective, but you need to be more than just effective when you're fighting the top level guys in the featherweight division and in any division, really?
So, when I watched the fight, this was the question I asked myself. I said, "Self, can Bryce Mitchell do this to the elite upper echelons?" And I said, well, when we're matching him, why don't we put him with somebody who's we're going to find out, right? And so the names that I posit for you, sir, there's one of two. Now, one is going to be a little bit wild in terms of what I immediately just said about pushing for this specific test.
Sure.
The first one, if we really want to push him, how about Yair Rodriguez? Now,
Jesus, that's
now,
yeah. Okay, go ahead.
the reason I'm steel manning this is he loses to Ilia Topuria. Look, these things are going to happen in MMA, right? These things are going to happen. Fine. I don't want to see, and I don't need to see, Yair Rodriguez fight Max Holloway again. I don't need to see him fight Brian Ortega again. And so what else are we going to do with him, right? Are we going to do Arnold Allen? Maybe, don't know. He's the other name, by the way. Or are we going to give one of the new up-and-comers, the guy that are slowly building? He's lost one fight, and it was to Ilia Topuria. Fine.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? That's the first option. The second option is Arnold Allen. Now, if I'm Arnold Allen, I don't take that fight in a month of fucking Sundays, right? I'm going in and I'm screaming for Yaya Rodriguez or a Brian Ortega or, whatever. But the reason I like the Bryce Mitchell-Arnold Allen fight is Arnold hits really, really hard. And we saw that Bryce Mitchell was hittable in that first and in that second round. I think it's a really interesting and really compelling matchup to see whether Arnold's grappling has gotten to a level where he can hang with somebody like a Bryce Mitchell. But equally for Bryce Mitchell, if Arnold Allen is able to negate some of that grappling, what happens? Because I think the answer is he gets lit the fuck up.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think if anyone can stuff the takedown, and we saw Ilya, I feel that we were probably going to see the result that we seen in the Ilia Topuria fight, and that was an absolute mauling by Ilia Topuria, to be honest. Now, I like those ideas because that puts Bryce Mitchell into a kind of position where we are going to find out. I think I know the answer to the question. Is it going to happen on the likelihood scale? I would feel, honestly speaking, that it's a minimal chance of it happening, but what if we took the Aldi version of those two matchups and we match them up next with Giga Chikadze? At an easy win and it gets Giga down there. I think Bryce Mitchell wins that. And then, or maybe we look at towards Calvin Cater and give him a Calvin Cater test. I mean,
I think
even at those
mauls those two fellas.
You think he beats Calvin Cater as well? I'd like to see Cater. I'd like to see Cater more than anything. I think Giga Kikaze just takes Giga down and that's it. I think it's going to be relatively easy. I think Calvin Cater might have a little bit about him to kind of cause him a few problems over a 3-round fight, perhaps. But
my issue with the Calvin Cater fight, right, is Calvin doesn't throw any kicks. And one of the things that Bryce does really well is he uses the side kick and he uses his kicking offense to create distance if the striking gets a bit hairy, right?
Yeah.
If the striking, and the thing that Mitchell can do really well is he can invest in kicks because he's so comfortable in his grappling, right? If Calvin Cater can't stop the kicks, then he's going to start overreaching on his shots and lunging in. When he lunges in, Bryce is going to level change and just maul him on the ground. I think Giga, yes, there is the level that the kicking game is so much more cultured and so much more mature than anything. I mean, Edson Barbosa's kicking game is fucking cultured and mature as well. But
that's the thing, yes. You're kind of seeing that you kind of saw what Bryce Mitchell does against that style again, that when he went in there against Edson Barbosa. And getting into a kicking game with a guy that wants to take you down is a tricky thing to do as well. It can lead to takedowns as well. But it'd be interesting to see what they do with Bryce Mitchell and how they handle him, because we don't talk too much about out of the cage antics, but what did you make? First of all, before we speak about anything, I will respect anybody's religion. I am not religious. I'm not religious myself at all, but anybody that wants to rely on their faith, they're more than welcome to in my eyes. And I'm not bringing this conversation up to belittle Bryce Mitchell for his actions, but we don't see it all too often inside the octagon, Harry.
Look, I think that one thing that the UFC has done really poorly over the last little while is allow fighters to show their personality, right? One thing that they've done excellently well, almost exclusively with Bryce Mitchell, they allowed the camo shorts. Amazing. Absolutely brilliant idea. He called for it over and over again. They gave it to him. Fantastic. There's only one fighter in the UFC that wears those shorts, and it's Bryce Mitchell. We have a roster of 500 fighters. One guy that wears them. Amazing. Lovely stuff. If a fighter chooses to bring a Bible or something similar into the octagon and raise it, whatever, there are two elements for me. The first element is we're setting a precedent now that fighters can bring personal effects into the octagon in order to proliferate their brand, in order to show who they are from a personality perspective. But we are also saying that it is fine to make those kinds of statements in the octagon. And again, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. You see Lionel Messi score 350,000 goals and he always points to the sky, right? You see many footballer immediately praise their faith after a big game, a big loss, whatever it is. And so frankly, I don't really have a problem because you are allowing a fighter to bring out their personality. The issue comes was where do we cross the line, right? What do we think is fine and what do we think is not fine? Again, I'm not saying that anything Bryce Mitchell did in his performance or in his in-cage performance was wrong. I don't think it was at all. But where do we begin to draw the line? Because one of the things the UFC has done previously with the uniform policy and whatever, and one of the arguments for having a uniform policy, at least when you're in school, right, is nobody feels left out. Nobody feels left out because everyone wears the same thing. And so whilst, yes, there's no individualism and there's no, self-expression, nobody can feel quote unquote offended or upset because everyone's wearing the same thing. Well, if you're now deviating that for a specific fighter, for him to be able to go in and make as explicit a statement as he did, well, then we have to expect other fighters to do that. We have to expect other fighters to want and be allowed to walk out with their flags or be able to raise them high or be able to make a very similar level of statement as a man going in and raising a book of faith as he did, which again, no problem with it. But if Ian Gary wants to walk out with the tricolor, or if Javid Bashrat wants to walk out with the Afghanistan flag, or if whoever it is, Volkov wants to walk out with the Russia flag, we can't really say that he shouldn't be allowed to do that,
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I don't even have too much to add that I can add to that, only the fact that a lot of people wanted to kind of go on and talk about that incident, talk about the post-fight interview with DC where he was asking Dan Ige for a prayer and everything like that. No one really I've seen highlight the fact that he generously donated $5,000 of his purse to the victims of the recent Hawaii tragedy, which I think was a fantastic gesture. I don't really feel too strongly about that kind of carry on either. I much prefer someone do that rather than someone go in and disparage the sport by saying something ridiculous. And we've seen that plenty of times before. But it's not everybody's taste, and that's fair enough. But you know what I mean? If it's an avenue where we go down where, this kind of leads to you fighters, like you said, being able to showcase some of their personality, well, I'm here for that. I don't want to argue against that at all. And I don't think we are going to argue on that at all. But we might argue. I don't think we're going to argue about this one. I think we're going to be fully in agreement about our next fight. And that was Marina Rodriguez and Michelle Waterson-Gomez, and one of the worst beatings that we've seen in recent times inside of an octagon. Harry, Marina Rodriguez, Michelle Waterson-Gomez. We spoke about both of these women ahead of the fight, the predicament that they're in, coming in on losing streaks, wondering if the time is slowly coming in both of their careers where they might think about hanging it up. Well, after watching the fight, I think we can maybe lay Marina Rodriguez's and any thoughts around her career, we can lay them to bed. But we may ask some questions about Michelle Waterson-Gomez because she took an absolutely humongous beating in this fight, and it wasn't really pleasant to look at. The fight could have been stopped, should have been stopped, in my opinion, before it eventually was. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, just an absolute annihilation. One thing I will say, and there is a prop here for Michelle Waterson-Gomez. I thought her grappling looked good. I thought her initiation into the takedowns looked good. She didn't try any head and arm throws. She was actually legitimately looking to catch single legs, run to doubles, use the clinch, etc., etc. But the length, the size, the power, the dynamism, the shot selection was just way, way, way too much. That first knee that hurt Michelle to the body, it hurt her about 45 seconds in. I mean, that was the end of the fight, right?
It was the beginning of the end. Yeah, that was it. It was like any of the questions that we did have, were pretty much answered there. And that was the the beginning, as you said, of a bad beatdown that came throughout round 1 and into round 2.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, when the referee actually forced Michelle Waterson into further damage when they stopped the fight for the cut, to check the cut to make sure she was okay. She was almost out then, and the referee stopped it. And I'm not disparaging the referee. He did what he had to do. He did his job, but she was 3/4 of the way out of there. And
Didn't he? And if I can't remember correctly, I watched so many fights this weekend, but that came almost with 20 seconds left in the round, didn't it? In round
yeah, there
1?
was long left in the round. I think it was like 40 seconds left, but
And Dom Cruz kind of highlighted that in the comments. Would you agree with what Dominic Cruz said there? Because I mean, I kind of do for once, which is strange to say. Would that maybe you let the fight play out, whether the finish comes or whether the end of the round comes? I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky one when you're dealing with fighter safety, but at that stage, there had been plenty of damage done already.
yeah, I mean, I don't listen to the comms, right? So I don't know what Dom said, but what
basically what he said, or for anyone else that didn't listen, is that he was questioning why the referee stopped it so close to the end of the round, but the referee isn't taking a look at what stage the round is at. It's irrelevant. But
exactly.
I did kind of understand what he was saying, in that, you know, either you could let it play out. I don't know whether they have an ability to take a glance at a clock or anything like that, but whatever whatever happened is whatever happened, and he did stop the fight. The doctor came in, assessed the cut. Michelle was fine to come on, and finished the rest of the round and went into round 2, where she really took a beating. But it begs the question why the conversation wasn't had to call the fight in between round 1 and round 2 by Michelle Waterson's team, to me.
100%. Like, that was the easiest 10-8 to score, with an element. I think if Michelle Waterson hadn't got that first takedown inside 15 seconds, I'd be messaging Shawnee and saying, is that a 10-7? Like, are we looking at a 10-7 there? Because every knee, every elbow, every shot was so damaging, so impactful. And Michelle Waterson had absolutely no answer for any of it. No answer for any of it. She survived purely on heart and grit and determination and her ability to just get back up and move through punishment. And look, we absolutely must celebrate her ability to do that, but we also must condemn a corner when your fighter goes out and is so badly beaten in round 1. You fine. If middle of round 2, a fight turns and it gets really fucking hairy and your fighter gets a bad beat down in the last 2.5 minutes, you bring them in, you assess them, and you say, cool, we've got 5 minutes here. I need to see something. That's one thing.
Yeah,
But
and like that exact statement was that I need to see something, and you know, some occasions we didn't see anything from Michelle Waterson-Gomez. There didn't look like for 1 second that she was going to be able to battle her way back into the fight, because when you take as much damage as she did, it's so hard to come back. Like the blood, your nose is busted up, you've cuts on your face. There's so much going on, and I mean, oh gosh, I just wish it was different. Like, you know what I mean? I wish there was this mentality where, like, common sense would prevail. Like, at the end of the day, we were talking about Michelle Waterson-Gomez at the end of her career, where, you know, what are we letting her take this damage for? What are you going to get out of this? And look, they'll say, oh, well, there was chances that she might come back and win. Well, no, there wasn't, because she went into round 2, she got beaten even further before she got finished. So, I mean, I don't know. It just frustrates the life out of me sometimes.
I agree. The name for Marina Rodriguez is the one and only Tatiana Suarez.
Ooh, jeez, you're throwing her right up into the mix. Tatiana might have. Oh, no. Am I getting.
Jessica Andrade is fighting Mackenzie Dern. Not
Right.
my justification for this is, unless we want to see another rematch, right? We're not going to do Verna Jandiroba, Marina Rodriguez 2. We could do Amanda Lemos, Marina Rodriguez 2, but we know how that turned out. We've already got a win over Yan Jourdain. Okay, it was a split decision, and Yan Jourdain's right there in the picture for the title shot. Mackenzie Dern, we've already seen. We've already seen Amanda Hebas. We've already seen Carla Esparza. Tisha Torres, one, is off being a mother. Congratulations. But we're not going to we're not going to be doing that again, right? And Cynthia Calvillo is so far down the rankings. And I don't even think she's a UFC fighter anymore. I don't need to see that either. And so the interesting matchup is, can she stop the takedown from Suarez? Because she wasn't able to stop the takedown from Waterson, but the clinch situation was dominant. And Tatiana Suarez does really good work from the clinch, right? So what's Tatiana Suarez's clinch game like in comparison to the Rodriguez clinch, which I think is actually one of her best assets? For Rodriguez, if she can't stop the takedown, can she stop the submission attempts? For Tatiana Suarez, if she can't get the takedowns, that striking has looked sketchy. And Marina Rodriguez will hurt you on the feet if your striking isn't up to par. And so I like that matchup. And equally, if she goes and she gets a win over Marina Rodriguez, that's definitely a name as an ex-title challenger that Suarez can hop on the mic and say, sure, look at my resume now. I'm 32. Give me the fucking title shot.
Can't argue any of those points at all. Just looking at the rankings here beside me, and yeah, I think you mapped it out pretty straightforwardly, and it'll be interesting to see what the UFC do decide to do with Marina Rodriguez. But yeah, time is not on her side, so I think it's a good idea. Put her up there against Suarez, give her that chance to get back up into the title shot, into contention again. Let's see what happens. What did happen in the fight between Brian Battle and AJ Fletcher was that Brian Battle went out and beat a guy that he should have beaten, to be honest, Harry. I think AJ Fletcher, not that great. Brian Battle is a guy that's coming into his own when the UFC picked up another finish here. That would be his second finish in a row. But I feel at this stage, a win over AJ Fletcher doesn't really tell us a whole lot about where Brian Battle is at. Is that kind of your way of thinking about this win and this fight as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to me was just Brian Battle was absolutely ginormous. He looked absolutely huge in their comparison.
Big fella.
Fletcher.
Yeah.
I think the reason I'm not even going to comment any much more, and I'm just going to give you or maybe we'll start the conversation with why I want the fighter to fight is Randy Brown for Brian Battle, is
Love
because
it.
we're going to find out.
Yeah.
Similar size, similar level, right? At least that we think Brian Battle is looking up towards that level of the division. If he goes in and beats Randy Brown, we can all say, all right, dude, cool. You've shown me something now. Let's go on and we'll have a further conversation about where you can be in this division. If he goes out and loses to Randy Brown, we say, okay, well now we know. Losing to Renat Fakhretdinov, fine, bro. That happens. Great fighter. No problem. But go in, beat Randy Brown, and then we can have a conversation.
I think, and that's exactly what we will do. Moving on to the next one, Charles Jourdain bear down over the Severe Spotlight this week. Another excellent article, SevereMMA.com. Head over there and check it out. This Monday, every Monday, check it out for sure. Harry, I'll do as I always do. We questioned Jourdain coming into this fight. We questioned him as in what can he bring in after the Cron Gracie fight, where he passed the IQ test. He had a difficult test in front of him, sir. And I'm going to let you break it down. Wax lyrical about Charles Jourdain and why you picked him for the Severe Spotlight this week.
Sure. So the reason why I picked him for the spotlight is slightly different to reasons that I would usually pick a fighter. Sometimes I pick a fighter because they just had an unbelievable performance. Sometimes I pick a fighter because they're a veteran and they went out on a high, like a Robbie Lawler article I did recently. Sometimes they're just an up-and-coming prospect and they look great, or there's somebody to look forward to. But this one I specifically chose because Charles Jourdain picked a way to win that was effective. May not have been beautiful, may not have been the smartest way to win, may not have been the way that I would have coached him to win this fight. But from the very, very beginning, he saw that there was, or at least he thought he saw, that there was an opening. And that opening was some form of guillotine. And he kept searching and kept searching and kept searching. And he worked himself out of some bad positions and he worked himself into some better positions. And eventually he capitalized and found a guillotine. And the opening line of my article was, sometimes in MMA, you just have to get it done. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to win. And it felt to me that Jourdain basically did that. Like it wasn't the smartest performance. It wasn't the best performance from Charles Jourdain that we've seen in his career, but it was a performance that he had fixated on a hole in Ramos's game that he had found, and he just managed to find a way to get it done. And I think that that's something that's very rare in MMA. It's very rare for a fighter to be so narrowly and linearly minded in a fight. You often see guys, they'll take whatever is available to them in order to win, right? They might have a specific skill set or want to be in specific positions, but very rarely do they seem to elect, unless you're Conor McGregor, do you elect for a single thing to finish a fight and then actively go out and chase that. And so for that alone, for that rarity alone, I wanted to highlight Charles Jourdain. As I have said, and when we get to the picks for who's next, I think this will highlight why I've picked those specific people. But if Charles Jourdain continues down that path where he actively elects to pick one certain thing and chases it, it's going to be the undoing for him, and I'm sure that he's aware of that. But I do think that there is a real interesting part of Charles Jourdain's character where he has the confidence to go out and say, I reckon I can guillotine this fella, and then actually goes out and does it, you know?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have the chance to speak with Charles ahead of one of his fights before, and that confidence really does shine through. But it's not a confidence that's by any way delusional. You know, he knows that he has holes in his games. He's more than willing to come out and talk about his losses as well as his wins and recognize his flaws. And I think we have to remember with Charles, and he's been around for quite some time. He's still only 27 years of age. You know, I want to go back and look at someone like maybe Charles Oliveira when he was 27 years of age. He was kind of in a similar enough kind of a stage, probably fighting better level guys. That being said, I have to say about Charles, but you know, winning fights, losing fights, kind of learning a little bit on the job about himself. And I think more so than anything else, what Charles Jourdain needs, Harry, is to just muster up a little bit of a win streak here, because his career so far in the UFC have been littered by wins and then losses and then another win. This brings him to a 2-fight win streak. Good win over Kron Gracie, another good win over Ricardo Ramos. You talked about what you'd like to see next for Charles. What would it be?
I got 2 names for you. I don't mind which one you pick. The first one is, do we want to see some wild shit? And that's Nate Landwehr.
Oh my goodness.
The second one is, do we want to do a let's find out? And it's
let's not. No, let's stop. No, give me the name first.
Lerone Murphy.
Oh, that's not a bad one. That is not a bad one. Okay, here I'll do as I always do. I think I like the first one. First one was again
Nate
Landwehr. Yes, I like that fight because it's just going to be madness in a box, kind of a thing. With Lerone Murphy, I feel that both he wants and I feel that he kind of deserves a little bit to fight up rather than fighting down. He's just got into the top 15. Is he going to want to give away his number 15 ranking to fight a not-ranked Charles Jourdain, which would be a very tough fight for him? But no, I think Nate Landwehr is a good one. I'd like to even see him maybe go against somebody else, maybe before Nate Landwehr. I think Landwehr has this kind of go-forward pressure style that Charles has come against. I mean, yeah, it's good matchmaking. I'm talking myself into it as we're breaking it down here, Harry. I like it. Let's do it. Charles Jourdain versus Nate Landwehr. Let's make it happen. It gets the Bounce Breakdown seal of approval as we move on to the prelim fights. And we're going to breeze through these prelim fights fairly quickly, Harry. And we start with the prelim headliner, Miles Johns versus Dan Arguetta. You had mentioned it's a fight that happened. I liked it. I liked this fight. I liked how it played out. It was interesting. I thought we saw a little bit of a level up in Miles Johns. He spoke about it after the fact as well. Absolutely blown away in the post-fight press conference or post-fight interview when his age came up. I couldn't believe Miles Johns was only 29 years of age. So he's got plenty of time left here in the bantamweight division. For some reason, I thought he was in his mid-30s, but massively wrong on that. This was a potential banana skin for him. As we said, Dan Arguetta is a tough cookie, but ultimately it was Miles Johns' experience, I think, that shone through and got him the win in this fight. Handled all the grappling exchanges, got off some really big impactful strikes throughout, and definitely deserved the unanimous decision win, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe after having watched the prelims, I sort of watched this fight and I was like, fine. Like,
Yeah,
fine.
it's all completely understandable, Harry.
Yeah, like
Completely understandable.
I certainly don't mean to shit on either fighter. Both are solid level fighters, right? Whatever. But yeah, I was just like, oh, can we just give me something, lads? Just give me something. I have a name for Miles Johns. Would
Please
you
do.
like to see Farid Basharat versus Miles?
Oh, yeah, the Basharat brothers there. Give me any one of them against Miles Johns. I could fucking
That's
even put two of them in there at the same time if you want to do it, and let's see what happens.
Javid has a matchup already. Javid is fighting
Victor Henry. It was supposed to be on this card.
yes. So yeah, let's do Farid and Miles Johns.
So that fight is happening in a couple of weeks, right? So we might even be able to put this matchup together via MMA match. So Farid Basharat takes on Victor Henry, who oh no, sorry. I thought Victor Henry, Miles Johns beat Victor Henry. It wasn't. It was Vince Morales in the last fight. Never mind. Let's just make Miles Johns versus one of the Basharat brothers. However it plays out, I don't mind because I love both Basharat brothers, as do you. Yeah. Let's talk about Tim Means. The Dirty Bird went in there and took out Inoue Neal hype job. Andre Fialho. Hey, you're thinking it, so I may as well say it, but I'm only joking. Look at I had high hopes for Fialho, but like, okay, early stages there was some signs, but yeah, it's completely fallen off a cliff for him. But that being said, he's way worse than he was when he came into the UFC, which is quite peculiar to see. We criticized and found out about his gas tank. We called this fight to a T. We said it would be mildly competitive in round one before he gassed out and got finished in round two. That almost happened in round one in this fight. He did manage to get to round two, but didn't last too long against the Dirty Bird there. Look, at any questions about his gas tank have been answered, and I think, the ultimate kind of opinion that I have against Fialho is a good hammer. He is a good hammer, but doesn't like being the nail. And when his back is against the wall, he tends to crumble and find a way out of fights. And that's exactly what happened in this one.
Yeah, I think if I'm really honest, I think that those 4 or 5 back-to-back fight camps in such a quick succession probably ruined Andre Fialho. The body needs rest after
Very good call. That's a very good read.
The body needs rest from weight cuts. The body needs rest from the dehydration. The body needs rest from just the stress of a fight week and an actual fight. And don't get me wrong, I get it. You want to get paid, you want to build a name, and it works. But the longevity of your career does not say the same thing. And Tim Means is a real veteran, really knows his way around a cage, and we really saw it in this performance. We saw some real interesting veteran savvy and some veteran tricks. But man, Andre Fialho should be beating Tim Means,
He should be, yeah. He definitely should be. Like, I think this fight kind of proves that, he's almost a lost cause now at this stage inside the UFC, and there's some glimmers of talent there, but it's just not happening for Fialho right now. And look at Tim Means is still out there, man, in 2023 picking up wins, and the Dirty Bird still rides through. How long do you think he has left, and who would you like to see him next? I mean, Tim Means, it was a big fight for him. He was looking to try snap a 3-fight losing streak, Harry. Another loss there might have cost him his UFC job. Gets the job done, gets another chance in the UFC. Who would you like it to be against?
I mean, I don't think Tim Means gets cut off three losses. I think Tim Means is one of these guys that's been around for so long. He's like part of the older era. It's going to be a Tony Ferguson job where he's 5 or 7 fights deep in a loss streak before the UFC start thinking about cutting him. I'm going to throw him to the wolves though. Your boy Mike Malott has not yet had a veteran test.
Jesus, Harry, are we going to do that to Tim Means?
And
are we really?
Look, Tim Means came out and showed that you can turn away a hammer with some real veteran savvy. I've not seen Mike Malott go up against somebody that can turn away a hammer. Tim Means, whether he's 375 years old or not, is the veteran test. And look, do I think it's a one-sided beatdown? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. But let's see.
Let's see. I mean, I had a kind of veteran versus veteran, and it was actually a rematch of an old fight that happened in 2015 when the Dirty Bird went in and took on Matt Brown, lost by guillotine choke in the first round. I mean, let's give the Dirty Bird that. Mike Malott is going to. Do you know what? Do you know Parakeet Pete from Dumb and Dumber when the guy took the head off the bird and just kind of cleaned it on the poor deaf blind kid in Dumb and Dumber? I feel that that's what Mike Malott would do to Tim Means if they were to both fight, and I don't really want to see that too much. But Harry woke up and chose violence this morning. He wants to do it. Well, look, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. I wonder with Mike Malott. I mean, I wonder is Mike Malott looking probably a stiffer challenge than that? I mean, we have the testing ones, but look, that's a conversation for another day. We could stay here talking. Let's talk about Cody Brundage versus Jacob Malkoun. Unfortunate end to this fight, Harry. Disqualification, elbow to the back of the head. What were your thoughts on the fight before that incident happened?
I think Brundage gives away position too much. I think Malkoun was the superior grappler. Brundage is far more used to being able to out-athlete his way through those positions. In my opinion, it's unfortunate for the fans. It's unfortunate for nobody else because Jacob Malkoun landed maybe 9 illegal shots in that fight. A lot of those shots were pot shots to the back of the head, and he needs to have better control of his weapons. The last one was totally egregious. Absolutely, totally egregious. He has a far wrist ride and he lines up the elbow. Now, there is a slight element here where Brundage, I was about to say Cody Garbrandt. Jesus, that'd be a mismatch, wouldn't it? Cody Brundage does start to turn his head inwards, right? Offering a little bit more of the back of the head. But if you look at the angle that Malkoun's throwing the elbow at, it is more like a shot directly down with the forearm and the tip of the elbow than it is to come around to the side of the ear like you would generally expect. And so Malkoun either had a complete lapse in judgment or knew exactly what he was doing and it was an egregious foul regardless. So don't be a fucking moron and go in and have better control of your weapons. You are so varied in your ability to throw and land damage from that position. To throw the shot that he threw was absolutely mindless, and he deservedly loses the fight for that reaction.
Yep, 100%. Couldn't agree more. We shall move on to the heavyweight division. That's Muhammad Usman versus Jay Collier. And I think the only thing that I can say about this fight, and I'm just glad that the UFC didn't put it on the main card here and it was down, because it just wasn't a good. It was a tale of two fights, really. We had a somewhat competitive fight until the eye poke happened and the damage to Jay Collier's eye. And then we just had this wounded fighter that was fighting for a round and a half that Muhammad Usman was unable to get out of the cage. And it was just a dreadful fight. There's no buttercoat in this one, Harry.
No, Jay Collier is by far the better fighter, but he's fighting 3 weight classes too heavy, and Usman's just not good. It's just not good.
I think that's all that we can say about that fight. And I'm going to give it back to you as well, just to talk us through the first 2 fights. I mean, slow start to this one, which it kind of ekes into the opinion that you had as we were getting to the top of the prelims. It was 3 tough fights in a row here. Montserrat Rendon picking up a split decision in the first fight of the night over Tamaris Vidal. Mizuki Inoue took out Hannah Goldy by unanimous decision. We've just talked about Muhammad Usman and Jay Collier. Your thoughts on Inoue's and Rendon's wins, please, Harry?
Sure. So Inoue looked good against Hannah Goldy. Sharp striking, decent takedown defense, some nice counters of her own in the wrestling, some nice front headlock stuff from her. Hannah Goldy just doesn't have enough variety. If it's not a massive hook over the top, she's looking to immediately clinch and just expecting her partners to fall over. And that's just not good enough, really, in the UFC. Montserrat Rendon looked okay. Massive for the weight class in terms of her length and her reach. Tamira's Videl, not a great fighter, all the same. Rendon was having some success with her long jabs, her long teeps, and like a long overhand right. Vidal just couldn't quite getting as close as she wanted to land her combinations. Rendon took the fight down a couple of times. Grand, no problem. Yeah, just low quality fights on both sides, frankly. I think Inoue has a touch more to give. I wouldn't mind seeing Inoue fighting Luma Lukbonmi in her next one, mostly because Inoue is somebody that had the sharp striking, the crisp striking, and the really good defensive wrestling. I'm interested to see whether she can implement some offensive wrestling against somebody like Loma Lukbonmi. And we'll see, right? We'll see if that fight, if Sean and Mick don't give me my cut and, do the matchmaking, that'd be grand. But yeah, just not great fights on those two openers. Really, really low quality, really.
And that's about it. That takes us through the card from top to bottom. An unfortunate start to the card, an unfortunate end to the card, but sometimes these things do happen. Nonetheless, it was a pleasure, as always, to break down the card with the man, Harry Powell himself. Follow him at BJJ_Harry Powell on all social medias. Check out Balance Grappling on Instagram as well. That's your new page, and he's putting up some excellent instructional videos on his Instagram. You can see that both on BJJ_Harry Powell and also on Breakdown. I think, is that right? What's the handle for your grappling page?
At Balance Grappling.
At Balance Grappling. Definitely go over and check that out if you're into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you're listening to this on the Patreon, leave a comment underneath, create a little bit of conversation. I'll definitely be popping on. I know Irish Dalton did a couple of podcasts back. I keep meaning to say that at the start and I keep forgetting. But yeah, we love any feedback that we get. If you agree with what we said on some things, if you disagreed, let us know on the Patreon, let us know on the YouTube channel as well. And we have a UFC free weekend, not an MMA free weekend, but a UFC free weekend. We've done 17 shows, preview shows, and 17 breakdowns in a row. We love doing it. We'll be back next week for a breakdown. Maybe we'll focus on some other mixed martial arts. Cage Warriors card coming up. Obviously a big PFL card. We'll look to get something out there for you. But until then, take care, folks, and look after your